Hey, I'm John. Welcome to the Last Tuesday Show for December 2020. Well, thanks so much for joining me for this Christmas/New Year's edition of the Last Tuesday Show. I hope you and your family had a wonderful Christmas, and I hope that the New Year's coming up will be a great one for you. I think we're all wishing that 2021 will be an improvement on 2020 and not just a continuation of the same. For this month's show, I've got several things lined up. There's some questions and answers that have come in from viewers over the last month. I've been doing a little deep thinking again, so I've got a deep thoughts segment that I hope you'll enjoy. I also take a look at some Christmases past, kind of centered around some old footage that my sister sent me of me and my family having Christmases back in the 70s. So I hope you'll find that fun. And of course, there's an interview. This month's interview is with James Otero, who is director and co-founder of Artis Opus. One of the questions that came in this month was, when you get stuck in a project, what do you do to overcome it? And there can be various things that can be going on with a build that cause us to get stuck. You know, it may be in the construction phase, it may be in the painting or in the decals or the weathering or something like that. So certainly the answer is going to be dependent a little bit on what phase you're in. Like, I get stuck quite often in the construction phase because that's not really a favorite part of mine. I know how to do it. I know how to overcome the obstacles. Sometimes I just get tired of having to do that. So a lot of times when I'm building a kit, if the construction is just really tedious, I try to just almost disassociate myself with it. Just, okay, the instructions say you slap part 17 to part 18. You glue them together. That's going to need some seam filling. Put some putty on it. Sand it down. I mean, I just go through, and whatever the moment needs, I just keep working until there's no more assembly left. And that sounds a little odd, I suppose, to do it in such a robotic fashion. But I'll often think about, okay, down the road, there's going to be something more enjoyable that I want to get to on this kit. But right now, I just got to plow through this part of it. So let me do that. So sometimes just doing that plow through can help break the log jam on a project. Another thing I often do when I'm stuck in some phase of a project is I'll kind of sit back and think, how do I want this to look 3 or 4 steps ahead? You know, if I'm just finishing up the painting and I'm kind of waffling on what I want to do with the first steps in the weathering, I may say, okay, well, how do I want it to look, you know, 5 steps ahead or 4 steps ahead, or how do I want it to look at the end? And I'll take a little time and backtrack from there to say, well, if I want it to look like this, that means before that I have to do this, and then I have to do this, and then I have to do that, you know, and you plan back to where you're at now, and that kind of helps you sort out the order of things that you want to do, and, you know, examining, well, if I do this first, then that means this, and then that means this, and oh wait, maybe I need to flip these two. And by kind of working on the process, you'll figure out what it is you need to do right now, which gets you over that bump, because you're focusing on something down the road in the build rather than just the one step you're facing right now. Another thing I'll often do is just put the model aside for a day or two. And in that day or two, sometimes I'll think about it and kind of ponder it a little more deeply than if I'm just sitting here at the desk and thinking 3 or 4 steps ahead. I may spend 2 or 3 days thinking about it and planning it and imagining it and just kind of seeing in my head where I think it ought to go. Other times I'll set it aside for 2 or 3 days and not think about it. I mean, I'll start building another model, or I'll focus on something else and just let it sit, just let it simmer and not really think about it. And then when I come back to it, I've got fresh eyes, and I can now, often I'll look at it and go, oh, okay, well, that problem that I was having right then doesn't seem to be a problem anymore. Or I've got a new view of it, a new perspective on it. You know, maybe it's in the assembly. Again, a problem that I have often. I get very impatient in the assembly. Sometimes if I just put it aside, that impatience I was feeling at the moment goes away, and I come into it fresh, and I can say, oh, okay, well, let me just build this thing and get it done with. And so giving it a little time is another thing that I think is a great way to help you get past obstacles, to just let it simmer for a while. And finally, there's what I'm going to call the nuclear option. There have been a few kits over the years that I went into with the best intentions. I looked at the kit, I examined the kit, I read reviews of it, and other people talked about it, and it seemed like it would be a good project. And I got into the project, and I just realized this isn't happening. It's not that the kit is too difficult to build, or that I'm not capable of building, or that it requires some tools or something that I don't have in order to help me build it. I just ain't feeling it. And I had to learn to recognize those times and to just say, okay, it's okay to put this kit aside. Maybe for a couple of weeks, maybe for a couple of months, maybe permanently. Because one of the things that I always really push is having fun in the hobby. I understand not every step is going to be fun, but that's the net goal that I'm looking for. And when I realize a project just isn't going like I want, and I've tried the other methods that I do to get past the hump, none of those are working. Sometimes I just step back and go, it's just not happening. And I've kind of learned this the hard way over the years. There have been a few times that I've been building models, and like when I was building aircraft, I'd been building aircraft, and I built a lot of Spitfires. There'd be times I would build Spitfire after Spitfire after Spitfire, and I enjoyed all of them. And I remember a friend gave me a model. It was some armor, and he said, you need to build an armor kit. I think you'll really enjoy it. You know, you'll build this, and man, it'll totally change your perspective. And so I went into it excited, you know, wanting to see, okay, well, I've not really built one of these before. Let me try building this. And I started working on it, and I started researching it, and I was just kind of like, eh. And it was a good kit. It wasn't a bad kit or anything like that. And but I kept trying, and I kept trying, and you know, I put the model together, and it came out okay, and I finally finished it. But I came away just going, I don't know. And so one of the things that I learned from that is, if you don't feel good about a project going into it, don't tackle it. And as you go through the project, if other methods of working through difficulties don't work, sometimes just consider, is this something I really want to be doing? Is this what I want to be spending what's supposed to be enjoyable hobby time doing? Because if it's causing more heartburn, is it really fun? So the answers for how to get unstuck on a project vary, but I would say focus on just those three things. Focus on, how do I want it to look 3 or 4 steps from now? That may get you past a temporary blockage. Then, if that doesn't work, step back from it for a couple of days and just say, let me just come back and reevaluate it. And then finally, in extreme cases, just look at it and ask yourself, do I really want to do this? Is this what I want to spend my hobby time, which is supposed to be fun, doing? There's nothing wrong with coming to the conclusion of, you know what? This is not what I want to be doing. I'm going to push this aside, and I'm going to grab this other thing over here that I know I'm going to have fun with, and I'm going to work on that. That's the point. There's no award for toughing through a model. Nobody's going to give you a medal or an award or anything like that. You may get a few bat packs on social media, but you know, that and $3 will get you a cup of coffee, right? So anyway, that's how I'd say I get through it, and hopefully it'll help you getting through the blockages in your own projects. A second question that came in was, what do you use to thin Tamiya paints, and what ratio do you use to thin them? Now, to answer the first part of it, I actually use several things to thin them. I had used for many years their X20A thinner, and it worked really well, and I had no problems with it. So I guess you'd say the basic default answer is go with the thinner that the manufacturer recommends. It's designed to work with it. And their X20A thinner does work very well. However, as I began using lacquer paints and I started using Mr. Color leveling thinner, I tried that with Tamiya. And I actually think the Mr. Color leveling thinner works better with Tamiya paints than their X20A. And it's not to say that I have any complaints about the X20A. It's almost like Mr. Color leveling thinner is X20A on steroids. Everything just seems to work a little better. The durability of the paint is better, the flow is better, there's very little problem with tip dry with X20A. There's virtually none with Mr. Color leveling thinner. It is a hotter thinner, so you have to use some precautions when spraying that, as you would with any airbrush, but especially when you're using lacquer thinners, to have a full respirator mask, not just one of those little masks that we wear now, you know, to protect us from COVID, but a full respirator. You definitely want to have that going. Good airflow, an extractor fan if possible. But I really like Mr. Color leveling thinner. That said, I've also tried AK's Real Color High Compatibility Thinner. I can never remember the full name. That has worked very well also. I still tend to prefer the Mr. Color leveling thinner just a little bit, but the AK thinner is very good, and it's actually lower odor than the Mr. Color leveling thinner, so that's a good option. Now, there's also occasions that I use isopropyl alcohol, the 91% stuff, because it works really well to thin Tamiya paints. And one of the beauties of it is it allows me to get some very diluted paint that I can spray at low air pressure, and that alcohol evaporates really quick, and I can get some great blending effects without having to worry as much about the heavily thinned paint spidering or running or pooling or anything like that. You can still do it with the alcohol. You can make some bad stuff happen, but I've found for certain effects that alcohol really works well. I tend to not use that for my main base coverage because it just doesn't seem to be as durable as using any of the other specific thinners made for model paints. But I keep alcohol on standby because it gives me the ability to do smoke effects and edge cleanup and other effects like that. So if you're looking for one thinner to use, I would recommend the Mr. Color leveling thinner. But the X20A, the Mr. Color leveling thinner, or the AK high compatibility thinner, all of those work really well. Alcohol is cheap to get, and so having that as kind of a standby for special effects works really well too. Now, as for the ratio, one of the things that I see people, especially when they're doing airbrushing for the first time, they kind of get hung up on a ratio. What is the ratio of thinner to paint that I need to be using? And the answer is, for any particular paint, even colors within the same brand, there can be a different thinning ratio needed for one color versus another within the same brand. So I don't necessarily work on ratios, but I eyeball it. I did a video talking about thinning your paints and air pressure and practice and all of that when it comes to airbrushing. And that thinning of the paints is really important to get it to a visual, where you visually see it and know that's the correct ratio. Now, it takes a little experience to get there. The method that I was always told when I first got into airbrushing is they say you want it to look like skim milk. And I thought, well, that doesn't really make any sense to me. I mean, I know what milk looks like, but it didn't make any sense. And so one time I just said, you know what, I'm gonna put some milk in my airbrush. And I did, and I immediately saw, one, I saw how when I would move the airbrush around like this, I could see how it was flowing. I could see when it got caught up on the sides of the airbrush, how did it flow back down? I could see the transparency of it. I could see all of these things, and I immediately knew, okay, now I get it. The next time I thin my paints, I found that I needed to thin them much more than I had been doing. So it's more of a visual thing for paints rather than a strict ratio, because like I said, there are some gray paints that will need one thinning ratio, but then maybe use a metallic and it needs another thinning ratio. And then, you know, some primary colors, especially like yellow, that can need a whole different range of it. So focus on the visual look of it. Now, if you're just starting out and you're going, yeah, but I just need a starting point. A good starting point is 50-50. 50% paint, 50% thinner. And then look at it in the color cup. Take a brush, put it in the color cup. If you stir it around and then take some paint and touch it to the top of the color cup, if it just sits there, it's too thick. If it runs down pretty well, then you're getting to the right point. Start spraying it on a model, or especially on a test model. Have something standing by that you can test it on. I know a lot of people use spoons to test it on. I have an old model that I just primer over every now and then, and I just spray stuff on it to test it. But test it. Does it go down smooth? Are you getting tip dry? Is it covering in a couple of coats, or is it taking, you know, if it's taking 10 or 12 coats to build up, you know, to full opacity, you may have got it a little too thin. If it's blasting out there in one, but it's looking kind of spotty or rough, you've probably got a little too thick. So I apologize that I wish there was a good answer. I wish I could just say 7 or blue or, you know, no. But this is one of those things where the ratio is going to depend on a lot of different things. So you're just going to have to go with it, use a ratio, visually check it, and then see, does this do what I want? After you've done that enough, you'll be able to just put any paint in your airbrush and look at it and know, okay, this is going to work or this isn't going to work. Regardless of the maker or the thinner or anything else, you'll be able to figure that out. When I look back over the time that I've been modeling, I can pinpoint periods that maybe I was having difficulty with a particular process or wanted to grow in a certain area or was trying a new technique. And so I would often find myself looking for different products to try and do that. And sometimes that process would show immediate results. I mean, there's the obvious things, you know, if you're trying to do hairspray chipping, then you need hairspray. If you're trying to do airbrushing and you don't have an airbrush, well, you need an airbrush. So sometimes finding the product to do the thing is obviously important. But what I also begin to notice, and especially as I look back, and I see it a lot in social media, especially with people just getting into the hobby or re-entering the hobby after a long time, is a tendency to too often, and I say this in regard to me, but I see it in others, is to too often think that it's the product that makes the effect or the technique happen. And by that, I mean, for example, using the airbrush as an example. Somebody will say, I want an airbrush, and so they'll get an airbrush, and maybe it's a good solid airbrush, and they'll start airbrushing. And they won't pay attention to the basics of airbrushing, and after a while, they start saying, well, it's gotta be the airbrush. And so they start asking questions about, well, what's a better airbrush? And they'll spend more and more and more money on airbrushes, trying to find that perfect airbrush that will bring up their game in airbrushing. And I've seen quite a few people get frustrated because it doesn't happen. And I think the thing that I have finally begun to see, and that I want to pass along to maybe help you out, or you can help someone else out with this notion, is that the perfect product is not really the goal we need to be shooting for. Now, by that, I guess to approach it from a different angle, what really matters is experience. You're not going to get experience unless you do a thing. Going back to airbrushing or the hairspray chipping or anything, if you want to get good at that, you have to do it over and over and over again. You're not going to airbrush your first model and come away and go, that's an award-winning finish. It just doesn't happen. I'm not going to say it's not possible, because I'm sure there's somebody out there that's going to put a comment that says, yeah, I did mine on the first shot, got a, IPMS Nationals winner. But for most of us, the first time it's not going to look great. And we have to step back a little bit, get our pride out of the way, and sometimes accept the fact that it's not the product. It's a need for experience. It's a need for practice. It's a need for repetition. You don't, in any endeavor, you don't get good at it apart from repetition. But so often I see in social media this notion that, well, if I just know how much time to put in, if I just know exactly which product to put in, then I can achieve that finish, that look, that whatever that I see somebody else do. And it's not the amount of time, it's not the product, it's the experience that matters. Now, that's not to say that good products and good processes don't matter. Yeah, you may want to experiment. Maybe you've never primed a model and you're wanting to prime it. And so you try a couple of different primers and see which one goes on the smoothest and which one is the easiest to apply, which one paint goes over, which one, when you mask stuff, does it pull up paint, does it pull up primer? I'm not talking about experimentation for the sake of finding a better product, but or just trying out something new. But if you're of the mindset that the problem with my work is the product, I would say really take a look and see if it may not be the product, it may be you. Because I've run into that over the years with several things. I would be doing something and I would be trying different products and nothing would be working, and I'd see other people doing it with the same products. And I had to conclude, okay, maybe the problem is me. Maybe the problem is I'm not versed enough in the use of it. Maybe I'm not paying attention to the details. Maybe I'm not thinning it enough. Maybe I'm not applying it right. Maybe there's some other factor, but those other factors center around me. And that's a hard thing to admit, because nobody likes admitting that they're wrong or that they can't do something yet. But when we start practicing it, when we start doing it repetitively, when we start testing little variations, not of product, but of application method, of thinning, of, how we look at it while we're doing it and tilt our chin over to one side, whatever it may be, don't get caught in the trap of thinking it's always the product. To give you a kind of a made-up real-world example, I haven't talked with him about this, so he may come back later and go, no, I totally disagree with that. But I would imagine, let's take, for example, Lincoln Wright, who is known best for his sci-fi modeling, especially with machining Krieger. Wonderful modeler. If you haven't looked up his work, check him out on YouTube. Paint on Plastic is the name he goes by on YouTube. Great stuff. Now, Link is a very accomplished modeler, an artist. I use that in the truest sense. He's truly one of those modelers that's not just somebody who builds stuff and paints it. he's an artist. But he is a very experienced modeler. And I think if I gave Link a built Maschinen Krieger model, and I gave him a few craft paints, I said, okay, here's some just Walmart craft paints. You have red, yellow, blue, black, white, and brown. And you get to use some water, and here's a big brush and a little brush, and you get to use these. Now, the finish he might achieve might not be exactly what he can do with the tools he normally uses, but he's going to squeeze out the maximum from those tools that were given to him because of his experience. Now, we all know we're not going to try and do an entire project with craft store paints. Probably not. Some folks do. But if you have experience in getting the most out of the materials you have available, then you're going to be able to achieve a finish that most people would go, there's no way that's craft store paints, or that's Walmart paints. And that comes from experience. Experience is the key. If you're going to build one model and try hairspray chipping on one model and come away from it and go, well, I wasn't real happy with that, so I'm not doing it again because that hairspray stuff just doesn't seem to be working. It's not the hairspray. It's not the paint over it. The thing I've had to learn, and that I'm hoping to convey in this, is the problem is you and me and us. So the next time you're working with a product and you're thinking something must be wrong with this product, this isn't working the way it's supposed to, don't say, well, this is the thing I see so often online, well, I must have gotten a bad batch. No. Yeah, that happens, but not as often as you see people claiming it's a bad batch. Instead of claiming it's a bad batch, step back, look at the process you're using, look at the method you're doing, look at how other people do it, and consider the fact that maybe what's needed is just some more experience, some more time. That's what's going to get you over the hump of getting to where you want to be in the application of a particular technique or product. At least that's the theory, and I'm sticking to it. When I was a kid, I loved Christmas. I loved everything about it, whether it was anticipating all of the presents, the visit from Santa Claus. I loved going to the Christmas parade in the town we lived in. I liked the food that came with it, the visits to Grandma's house. I liked going to church and hearing the Christmas story and the Christmas messages, and especially hearing the Christmas music. We had a Christmas cantata that was always just really cool to see. I loved every bit of it. But of course, as I got older, one of the things I loved was all the models that I got at Christmas. I always looked forward to those. We didn't get snow very often where I lived in South Georgia, but when we did, it was always great, especially at Christmas. And I loved going out and playing in the snow. I mean, what kid wouldn't? And just throwing snowballs around and seeing what I could do. But the best part, of course, was the presents. Whether it was some of those little train sets that I got as a kid and I always enjoyed putting together, or when it was later on, maybe when I got various vehicles that I could roll around and play with. And then as I got older, I started really getting into airplanes, and you can see here just briefly my B-17. That would have been the Christmas of 1978, and me showing off my muscles. But I was a very serious kid, didn't goof around very much or anything like that. Well, as I film this, it's actually a few days before Christmas, so I'm looking forward to Christmas at this point. But by the time it comes out, Christmas will have already passed. So I hope you and your family had a wonderful Christmas, and I hope you're able to look forward to a happy new year. And we all hope that 2021 is going to be better. Thank you so much for the support you've given me over the last year. That's been an ongoing Christmas gift to me, and I thank you for it. and I'm just looking forward to what's to come. This month's interview is with James Otero, who is director and co-founder of Artis Opus paintbrushes. Artis Opus makes a line of high-end, handmade natural hair brushes designed specifically for miniature painters. And not only do they have the usual, size 0, size 1, size 2, but they have a range of brushes designed specifically for dry brushing. They're not your traditional wide brush that, we use it for dry brushing, but something designed specifically for dry brushing. And there's links down below, not only to their website so you can take a look at their products, but to their channel, their YouTube channel. And there you can see them using those dry brushes. And the techniques they demonstrate there are so very awesome. If you think dry brushing is just kind of a crutch that is done in lieu of other techniques just for speed, you really ought to take a look at them, because it's opened up my eyes to the possibilities of using this simple foundational technique to get some really high-end results. So I'm really grateful to James for taking time out. I know this time of year for someone who sells product online must be really busy. So I appreciate James taking the time to be able to talk with me. And I hope you'll find that this is a very fascinating interview. I was fascinated by the process that goes into designing and planning some brushes and just how that has worked out for them. So on to the interview. Well, today we're joined by James Otero, who is the co-founder and director of Artis Opus, a company making some fabulous brushes and doing some amazing video work on YouTube that I've been a fan of now. I discovered them a while back, and I am a huge fan of their work. James, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much for having me. Really, really appreciate your time and allowing me to obviously have a chat with you, just obviously about AO and obviously all the things that we do. And a big thank you for all the kind words. I'm sure Byron and myself and obviously Greg will all be very appreciative of that. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, let's get right into it. What was the impetus for starting Artis Opus? Was it a sudden realization of this is what I have to do, or was it developed over time, something you just kind of worked on over time?
So about three and a half years or so ago, I've already got another business in the industry, but essentially, as a painter myself, as well as Byron, and we getting sort of being able to walk into your local hobby store and pick up super high quality paintbrushes for either for just general hobbying or all the way through right to sort of competition painting is quite difficult. Now there are obviously lots of different brands of brushes and things that are out there, but the key thing for me is that a lot of the more high-end brushes that are known or that are out there are fine art products that are suitable for painting miniatures because of the size of the brush heads and things like that. They're not ergonomically designed for miniature painters. Mm-hmm. Typically with fine art, you'll hold the brushes further back from the ferrule and further back down the handle for doing more sort of controlled sweeps and strokes and things. Whereas with miniature painting, obviously, you hold the brush quite close to the ferrule, and it's so right from the get go, I saw a market gap for creating a brand and business that produces paintbrushes designed by miniature painters for miniature painting. Me and Byron obviously worked together through our different businesses, and it was from a conversation that I had with Byron, and we spoke about obviously an idea that I had. I wanted to run it by someone else who obviously had a business in the industry, just so I could sort of see if it had sort of weight to it. And we decided to work together from that point, if it makes sense. So there are three of us obviously that own Artis Opus, and obviously Byron and myself predominantly miniature painters, whereas Greg is still in the industry but doesn't really do much of the hobby, to be perfectly honest. So it was a really, really good start. There was a market gap back then for a business or brand to work with as many wargaming shops and hobby shops as a company that produces brushes and products for miniature painters and for miniature painting in the industry. And that's kind of where Artis Opus came from. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like where things started and how things sort of began.
Cool. So you saw the need in the market and you jumped on it. That's the classic business story. Yeah. Well, how do you get started with making brushes? I'm guessing there would be a process of trying different brushes, looking for particular traits. What was that like when you made the decision? What was that like to get started doing the brushes?
Yeah, so one of the key things that that we really wanted was that, number one, they have to be handmade, and they have to use that sort of the finest quality components, because we didn't want to deliver a product which wasn't made of those commodities. So, for example, the Kalinsky, and obviously just the handles and all these different things that make up the brushes. We, as a business, all of our products, as in our brushes, are all handmade here in the UK. So they're not made outside of the UK, in the Far East, or anything like that at all whatsoever. And specifically as well, when it comes to Kalinsky, our Kalinsky that we use per gram is actually more expensive than gold. So it shows you the quality of the Kalinsky which we actually use. As a painter, first and foremost, having a product and a brush which you can continuously rely upon. Now, what I would always say is that it's a handmade product made of natural substances, which when you combine those two things, it's not like a piece of steel, or it's not like an article which is 100% infallible. As being frank with you, because it is hair and it's a natural sort of object, combined with being handmade, you're never going to have 100%. But the way that we are as a business is that if there is an issue, customers can approach us, and with all fair reason, if there's something wrong with the product, we will replace it and do that for customers. That's not an issue. Obviously, there are people, unfortunately, that put paint in the ferrule and all these different kind of things, but we try and be as fair as physically possible. But the thing is that we have a business that is run by people that are painters, that understand painting, that created the products for painters, as painters, and we understand what happens to those products when they're used. So we try and be, as I said, produce the most initiative-based, ergonomic products that we can. And also at the same time, obviously, look after our customers as best as physically possible. It's not an easy task. Believe me, it was a long time. Like our first product, which was Series S, which was put to Kickstarter, that in itself had a lot of R&D, like a lot of development behind it. We obviously tested different handles, different sort of head loads, all these different things to try and design a range for Series S, which executed all the tasks that was needed, right from the 000, for example, all the way up to the size 2, which for a long period of time was the full range of Series S. It's only in recent years that we've added the size 3, 4, 5, and 6, and the 5 and 6 only being released this year. So we've expanded Series S because what we try to do with the design of the heads is that to teach painters to use bigger brushes. So that the biggest problem that a lot of painters have is that, for example, the head dries out because obviously it's quite small, and that's typical of fine art brushes. So all of our brushes tend to have more of I try and get the shape right, but more of like a bulbous shape in the center mass of the head, so that you've got enough moisture behind that tip to keep it working for prolonged periods of time. Also, on top of that, Series S, the handles themselves, you'll probably notice they're way thicker than any other sort of brushes on the market. And the reason for that is because, as a painter, I've been there where I've painted for 7, 8, 9 hours a day, and you do get hand cramp, and you do get, because the brushes are quite thin that I used to use, if that makes sense. Yeah. So we designed handles which were a lot more ergonomic. They're more like a pen, or closer to a pen for you to use. So they feel more comfortable in hand. They're perfectly balanced. So even the ferrule, the nickel that we use in the ferrule is not a heavy nickel, so that essentially that if you hold it, you don't feel like it's being pulled down by the end of the brush, if that makes sense. Loads of things have been thought about and designed into Series S. So that was our first product, which we formulated and released through Kickstarter, and we were absolutely taken back by how well it was received. It was just a phenomenal Kickstarter that we just helped us develop the brand and business which we've got. So yeah.
Well, when y'all were in development of these brushes, how did you know you'd found the right combination of traits that this is the brush? Because there had to be that moment when you were sent the brushes and you're holding them and you're painting with them and you're going, yeah, this is it. This is it. How did that feel?
Remaining as humble as physically possible. Like, obviously Byron and myself tested the brushes as painters, but we're I'm fortunate to have some close friends that are exemplary painters within the industry. So Richard Gray, Andy Wardle, Gareth Nicholas, Caleb Wisenbach, like loads of painters that we approached and wanted to work with from day one. So they obviously are signature artists of the business. But a lot of the R&D for the various iterations of Series S, getting it to the right point, was involved with myself and Byron testing them, and also as well, obviously, Andy, Richard, and all the guys that are on board as signature artists of the business, Ankel Geraldis, Neil Hollis, all these guys. So it was a bit of a 50-50, to be perfectly honest. And I think if we hadn't have done that, we wouldn't have had the product that we have. And I think the reason for that is because we had so many skilled painters that understand what makes a good brush involved with the development, design, and formulation of the brushes overall, if that makes sense, before we even decided to launch them. So there was about a year's worth of development behind Series S before we actually launched it. So we were doing stuff in the background, I say shadows, but unaware to the community and to the public, developing the product and developing the range and brand. And then obviously when we launched it, it was ready to go, finished, finalized, if that makes sense.
Okay. Well, that kind of segues into I wanted to ask you, you were mentioning trial runs with other painters, getting input from other painters, letting them test them. When you sent that first batch off to them to try, to say, hey guys, what do you think? Was there kind of a hold your breath moment where you're, are these as good as we think they are?
Yeah. There was, to be honest, there was that. And I think the reason being is that, it's almost like when you're painting a miniature, like that's the best way I can explain it. Like you stare at this thing, work at it for so long that you get encapsulated by it, and it becomes your life, if you see what I mean. And it's only when you have that like fresh eyes and you step away from it, that when you come back to it, that you realize, oh, maybe this isn't as good, or I can do this a little bit better, or this could be a bit better, or blah blah. So it's very similar with the brushes, because we would, Byron and myself would test them, we'd paint for quite a prolonged periods of time, stop using the brushes, come back to it later, use them again, try other brushes and things to compare sort of like how they performed and all these different bits and bobs. And then obviously we knew it was a good brush, and we knew that the handle worked nicely, the head shapes were great, the moisture retention was great, that the snap on the bristles was great because of the Kolinsky we chose, all those different things. But you do have that thing of, I know it's good, but I really hope that it's as good as we think it is. And unfortunately, we got some good feedback. We changed a couple of little bits and bobs from feedback that we received, and then like Series S was ready to go. So it is a daunting thing, I'll be honest with you.
I bet. And it must have been the same way when you first started the Kickstarter for it. When you started that, did you have a feeling it would go as well as it did, or was it one of those campaigns that kind of surprised you with how well it was received?
So we obviously, look, we were working with a lot of very proficient painters that are exceptionally well known, that have won many accolades, like Golden Demon Slayer swords, the lot. So so we knew that it had enough punch to it to make a dent into the industry, but I think we didn't realize how much that market gap, which initially was seen, was actually required. Because the thing is like, most hobbyists, pre-AO, and couldn't walk into their local hobby shop and necessarily pick up anything different from maybe one or two other types of brushes. But to be able to walk in and consistently pick up Kolinsky brushes in the store is something that I think, that we've tried to put stretches far and wider for people. So when the Kickstarter launched and we had the retailer pledge on there, the amount of retailers that signed up and were like, right, I want this in my shop, because it kind of like ticked that box of us seeing the market gap and then having that realized by stores actually physical shops backing the Kickstarter as well as individual painters. So it was a really, really good, sort of acknowledgement that we had made the right decision to do what we'd done, I think, to be perfectly honest. And we were blown away by the reception of it, like absolutely blown away by the reception of Series S. So yeah, it was great.
That's awesome. That's always a good feeling when something you've worked on, you launch it out there and it just goes beyond your expectations. It's a moment you can breathe easier. Well, by the time you got to your Series M and your Series D Kickstarters, you already had a reputation established. Were those a lot easier given the previous experience, or were there still some nervous moments with them?
No, so I'll talk about each one independently, because they're very different. Like so Series M. So off the back of the Kickstarter for Series S, we had a lot of requests for people that were like, oh, do you do miniature sizes and miniature size? And the thing is, like in my own painting, I'd used miniatures once or twice before, like just for real fine detail work. But I think how do I put it? I think it's an oversight on our part when we designed Series S. It's possibly that we didn't design that sister range to it for those painters that prefer the shorter, more stubbier kind of brush head shapes. Obviously, immediately when we started getting requests, are you going to do miniatures? Are you going to do miniatures? You know, blah blah. I prefer a smaller brush head size. All those kind of things. Immediately, we wanted to do Series M pretty much straight away as soon as we started getting those questions through on Kickstarter and socials and via email and all that kind of thing. So Series M was developed. It had a similar sort of development time in the sense of the process. It was quite a quicker design because we already had established, you know, the shape of the head that we wanted. We just needed to reduce it to make it that shorter, stubbier kind of head shape, if you follow me. So Series M was you know, we know for a fact that the percentage split between standard size, obviously Series S, and miniature Series M, the user base is a lot bigger for Series S than it is for Series M. But we didn't want to neglect those customers and those painters that wanted those smaller brush sizes, if you follow me. So it was really important that we done that, and we released Series M, you know, and it done very well on Kickstarter. We were more than happy with what it did. We were actually very, you know, astounded by how many people actually looked at Series M and thought, well, I've been using standard sizes, but maybe these miniature sizes will be better for me. And some feedback that we've had from a lot of people is that both of them are tools for different jobs. There's not a better brush than a Series M or Series S, but they're used for different tasks, or even the size 2 from Series M can still be used for a lot of the work that some of the mid-range size brushes in Series S can be used for. But the beauty of it is it just gives a painter the scope to choose their tool for the job that they want to do, which I think is a really important thing. And I think it was something that commercially was lacking in our industry for shops, like the ability to walk into a shop, you know, or buy from us directly and go, look, you know, I want to try something that's going to give me a bit better control for freehand, or a bit better control for doing this edge highlight, and I struggle with it with a larger size brush. If I try, you know, I've had people personally say to me that their painting or edge highlighting, for example, is improved by using a Series M because it's a little bit stubby, a little bit sort of stiffer in the way that the brushes behave. So it gives them that extra little bit of control that allows them to paint edges and things. So I think it was an important Kickstarter. It was needed, and also the other thing is it opened a lot of people who weren't aware of miniatures became aware of it because they obviously knew of Artis Opus, they knew of Series S, and they thought, oh, I'll try these. And then from trying those, they've then discovered that miniatures are a better brush for them as well. So it's using that initiative to create a product which helps painters to better themselves, if you follow me. So that was that. Series D, obviously, where Series M and Series S were kind of like, initially Series S was like my kind of baby, and then obviously like me and Byron worked on it together, blah blah. Series D, I can't take any credit at all whatsoever for it. It is Byron's baby. He worked on it for a very long time. I think it's about 4 or 5 years that he'd been working on that prior to even Artis Opus or us doing it together. It was something that he really has this absolute passion for army building and army painting, you know, maximizing quality as best as possible with also fast execution. And that's obviously evident in a lot of the videos that he does on YouTube. You know, obviously very well, slightly biased, but obviously very well presented and very well executed. But the reality is that once obviously we launched Artis Opus, the project that he'd been working on and developing those dry brushes was something that we would have been silly not to include within the business. So it was really important that we included it. And again, we launched it. We had people have been dry brushing for a very long time, and the products that they've been using, without boring you with the loads and loads of explanation of how the product works, because I'm sure you've seen all the videos that Byron does. But essentially, the standard chisel kind of wedge shaped dry brush that people in the industry have been used to for a very, very long time, it dies very quickly. It doesn't really perform the task, and it doesn't give you the scope to create those very subtle sort of textures and highlights and stuff. And that's obviously one of the key things that was involved with Series D, plus also the ability to attack the surface of the miniature from any angle without the worry of the brush head splaying or having streak marks because you've got the odd bristle that's not been supported by the central core of the head of the brush. As I'm sure you know that the brush heads, and for anyone who doesn't know, Series D, the brush heads, they wear as you use them because you can use them in any direction, plus the softness of the hair that's used. It just gives gives a really, really lovely finish to the miniature when you're working it, and you really don't. You can dial back on the sort of force that you use them. So that's just the brushes and the beauty of them. Obviously, again, really lovely handles that are super ergonomic. You can use them for ages, all those kind of things. And then obviously the real technique, because it's not just a set of dry brushes, which again I'm sure you know, but for anyone who hasn't seen the videos, it's not just a set of dry brushes that last you longer, perform better, and give you a better finish. It comes with the dampening pad and texture palette, which are integral to the Series D technique, which is what it is, and that's part of what Byron had developed over, over 4 or 5 years, I think it was. And the beauty of it is that a lot of us will go to paper towel or paper to take off the excess paint from the brush, whereas you're going to pick up fibers from that. You're going to have all all those kind of things. Using the texture palette and the dampening pad in unison together, you reactivate the paint on the brush when it's dry, so it allows you to take that paint off and continue using it. You're more efficient and methodical with paint, which is really good. And the beauty of the texture palette is that it allows you to test how it's going to come out on the surface of the miniature on something that admittedly isn't the same material, but it performs and behaves in the same way that the model will behave when you touch it with a brush, if you follow me. So again, it's a really so we obviously put a lot of thought and effort and development into the Kickstarter, because we wanted to deliver it in the right way, and we did. We said reinventing dry brushing, because that's what Byron has done with that product and that technique from the moment that he started developing it. The brushes for the product, that I talked to you about, obviously the development process for Series S being around about a year, but Byron put in 4 years worth of R&D into it to get the brushes. We tried hundreds of different hairs, shapes, lengths, all these different things that make the brushes what they are. And obviously, after that development process, it produced a product which, in the most modest way possible and humble way possible, as a dry brush, in a biased opinion, is second to none. So that's essentially the process. But when we launched it, we had no, because unfortunately, dry brushing is a phenomenal technique that is a great, I would say, a pillar of miniature painting, to be perfectly honest. It's a technique which, whether you're extremely experienced competition painter or you're just someone who produces armies, you use it as a technique. It's not capped by skill limit, if that makes sense. So we wanted it to be put in a way that wasn't with this stigma, it's dry brushing. We wanted to put it in a way and really wow people with what you can do with the product, as a set of brushes, before the technique that's involved within it as well. So we launched obviously the Kickstarter, and it was just, we were mind blown at how crazy it went, because it was people saw what could be achieved by it and were just blown away, which we were, again, super humbling to have a business and brand that, for all intents and purposes at that point had only been around 2 years, and the product just went crazy. So it's been extremely humbling and very very nice to see people adopt something that we've spent collectively working on for a long time. So sorry for the long answer, but
Well, the first time I encountered the Artis Opus channel, I was fascinated to see the results achieved with dry brushing, because I'm certainly not a high-level mini painter or anything like that, but I've always used dry brushing. It's a fast technique. It's an easy technique. I've always thought it was an underrated technique, and it's so very approachable by beginners, as you pointed out. I heard someone say, and it may have been Byron, saying that the only mistake you can really make is having too much paint on the brush. That's about the only mistake you can make. So it must have really given y'all an avenue into the mini painting market that others have really overlooked, hasn't it?
Yeah, and that's the thing. One of the key things that that we've always wanted as a brand and as a business is we do look for those gaps in the market that as painters, we're like, well, why is there not this, or why is there not this, or why has this not been done? And that is one of the key things, that we're an initiative based business, in the sense we look at things that make the task it's not about sacrificing quality. It's about producing something which becomes integral to your painting, if you follow me. Yeah. So it's a real, you know, that's one of the key sort of cultures behind Artis Opus and AO, is that we want to produce products that, as painters, as owners of the business, Byron, myself, you know, that we want to produce stuff that you're going to go, right, yeah, I can understand why they've done this, and I can understand why that's come along, if you follow me. So you know,
yeah. In one of the videos, and I don't remember which one, Byron mentioned something to the effect of dry brushing goes best over dry brushing. Right. And I'd never thought about it in such terms, but it made sense. And in my own application, I immediately saw it. Yeah. It's a great example of how teaching the why is often as important as the how. Has that been a purposeful goal in the demonstration of the techniques and products, to combine those two, the why and the how?
Yeah, I think that's the one thing. I think, like, well, you obviously mentioned about obviously Series D, but like with any of the products that we produce, like you know, if you buy a set from us, then in that set you get care instructions on how to look after your product. There's no other company in the industry like produces products that come with care instructions, and obviously the video content that Byron produces and the odd video that I've done. Like the reality is that we want painters to have products from us because they like them, and at the same time they look after them. You know, I don't, quite frankly, as one of the owners of the business, I don't want customers to not come back to us because they've had problems with the product or whatever. Like, we want to put everything in place so that they have the support from us as a company to use them with confidence. There's a really good acronym which is one of my favorites, which is the word fear, or which is another form of anxiety and all those kind of things, is false expectations appearing real. Now, if you use something with false expectations, you kind of are held back by it. And a lot of the things when we talk to people that use our products, like if you have that stairway to execution in the form of guidance and help from us, be it cleaning your brushes, looking after them, how to apply stuff, putting dry brush, stippling onto a surface so then you can dry brush on top of it a lot better, all those kind of things, like, it's integral to have, we see it as a business to offer that support and guidance, because it's a duty of care. It's a duty of care from us as a business that people have confidence in the products they're buying from us, and also confidence in what they're doing with those products, which is really important to Byron, myself, and Greg. So, it's really, really, really important, and that's why, the venture of doing the YouTube channel and all those videos is not just obviously to show off obviously our products and what you can do with them, but also at the same time it's just so that we're giving people and customers the opportunity to learn how to best use those from the people that designed them, if you follow me. So it's it's really key to us.
Yeah. Now, in the videos, and this, I'll have to admit, when I saw this the first time, there was kind of a Homer Simpson dope moment when I thought, why didn't I ever think of that? Y'all use a textured palette with the dry brushing. And so I guess that goes back to all of Byron's research into not just the brushes, but the whole package of it, because you don't get the fibers all over the brush like you would with a paper towel or something else. So that has been a huge thing as I've watched. It seems to be a real advantage to the entire system.
Correct. Yeah, it is. As I mentioned, and I'm sorry that I jumped that in early, but like the reality is that like Series D comes with a technique, as I mentioned. It's really integral to it as a product. Like, of course, you can use the dry brushes as you stereotypically would, like for all the dry brushing that you've done prior to using Series D. But again, that texture palette is obviously it's a product, but it's designed to be used in unison with Series D, so that when you're removing paint from the brush, as you quite rightly said, we've all used paper towel for many, many years prior to the release and development of Series D. But you do pick up fibers from the paper towel, like when you're moving the brush backwards and forwards. And the other thing you'll notice is that as I mentioned, like, you don't need to be as vigorous or as hard or abrasive with Series D. Like, a lot of people initially, when they first get it, it's almost like muscle memory, like driving a car or playing an instrument. You use it really sternly, blah, blah, on the surface of the miniature. You don't need to, because the brushes are soft, right? Because you're removing the excess on that texture palette, which essentially, for all intents and purposes, is the same as the model that you're using. You get to kind of, again, going back to that acronym of false expectations appearing real, you kind of test what it's going to be like on the texture palette, and once you get it to how you want it to come off, you then do it on the model, and you've got no worry because you've seen that it's done, that it's coming off how it was. So it's really it's designed to help improve the quality that you produce on your miniatures through testing it first, and also the whole system of going back to the dampening pot to reactivate the paint on the brush, because obviously friction creates heat which dries the paint on the brush. You just dab it quickly, it reactivates the paint on the brush, go back to your texture palette, and then back to your miniature. But that cycle of repetition actually cleans the brush, because it removes the paint from the brush at the same time. So it's a beautiful system that, you know, quite frankly, again, remaining humble, it's not my addition to the business. It's something that Byron developed for a very long time. You know, but it's something that we're super passionate about. You know, when I first sat down in the very early days of the business, and when I obviously sat down with Byron and he showed me Series D, or what was the precursor to Series D, and I was like, look, you know, I've dry brushed for years. Like, what's going to be different, you know? And he showed me this. Quite frankly, look, as a, you know, and I'm remaining humble, as a painter of many years, I felt like I was just starting out again, because I was like, I've never seen anything like that before in all my life. So it's a really interesting technique, and I think that with practice, and that's why I think that, you know, Byron's been so passionate about doing the YouTube videos, is that, you know, Series D is his baby, and he loves it, you know, and the thing is like, it would be a disservice to customers not showing them what the full potential is of the brush range, you know. You know, I hope that answered the question anyway. So
no, it's exactly, you did perfect, because like with the dampening pot, for years I've always thought, okay, when you're dry brushing, dry is the key, you know. And the first time I'll admit, the first time I watched the video, one of the videos, I don't remember which one it was, and I saw him damping it, I was in my head, I'm kind of going, rookie move, you know, because I'm thinking, you keep it dry. But then when he showed it and I saw the potential, and I actually, in my own simple way, tried it here. I'm like, oh, this is just brilliant. I love this. So that was, I guess all of that research really paid off for him.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it, you know, like, you know, and the thing is like the dryness that we talk about, like with stereotypical dry brushing of the past, like, you get a much chalkier finish because the friction of you're rubbing hair on a plastic model. It's gonna, you know, you don't see it because obviously it's so minute, but at a molecular level, you're creating heat and friction, which essentially dries the paint out. So just knocking it back by using the damping pad, it just gives you a much smoother. When you know, when he showed me blending using dry brushing, because obviously, like, as a painter, I can blend with like normal acrylics and standard size brushes like Series S and all that kind of stuff. But when you see dry brush blending, it's just, I was, as I said, that first conversation that we had, I was just like, this is ridiculous. Like, I've never seen anything like this in all my life. So it was incredible. Like, you know, in the early days, to kind of feel like you thought you know most techniques and most things, and then to go right back to basics on the technique which has been a staple for a very long time. You know, so it's a phenomenal thing. And again, I remain humble. It's not my personal contribution to the business, but you know, I grabbed it with both hands when I learned it and saw it, and I run with it as hard as possible because it's so damn good. So
it was, like I said, for me also, it was kind of an eye-popping moment when especially when I saw him doing the blending. I'm like, wait, you can do that? That was fun. Well, your videos document the process of painting minis very well. Has the dual task of not only demonstrating painting minis but also showcasing the product, have y'all found that has pushed you in terms of your skills and your abilities to grow even more?
Yeah, 100%. Like, you know, and again, I can't speak from personal experience because, again, remain humble. I produced one video on the channel, and that's just purely because of other commitments and things I just haven't had the opportunity to. But the reality is that the ability to, as I mentioned, the ability to demonstrate products that we produce, and also give back to the community, because I think it's really important. Like, you know, our industry and our community in general, you know, it is about obviously working together and supporting together. It's a very personal thing. Like, you have a lot, you know, so I think as a business, it's kind of like really nice to do things for the community, to show people obviously what you can do with our products. Obviously, let all cards on the table. We are showing you our products and what you can do with them, and it is a form of saying, well, look, here's this new brush range, blah blah blah. So it is advertising to an extent, but I think it's about offering value. And I think if you offer more value than you do any kind of sale, I think people warm to that a lot better personally. And I think, like I said, it's integral and part of the business, going back to what I was saying about offering care instructions in the brush sets and all those kind of things. Like it's a really important thing to give back to the community through aiding in the form of tuition on using products that obviously we've developed. I think it's part and parcel. It comes hand in hand with developing good products. So yeah.
Cool. Well, now you've had 3 very successful Kickstarter campaigns. Your YouTube channel is growing rapidly. I checked the subs like 3 weeks ago as I prepared for this, and then I checked them just the other day, and I was like, "Whoa, there's been a huge jump." So y'all are growing really fast. Have you had difficulty keeping up with this growth, this success? Has it been tough keeping up with?
I'd say to an extent, yes and no. Like the no part of it is just obviously like, producing the variation of things. Like that's why Byron and the team that are involved with obviously developing that. Like they put a lot of hard work into just come up with different ideas, different things. Like there's loads of different things we've got in the pipeline. Like loads of really really cool projects and really cool things that are going to come on the YouTube. So if you don't mind, a little plug. But if you haven't subscribed, go subscribe to the channel. There's loads of cool things that are coming up. But it is I always see I manage various social media platforms in the industry for both my companies, and the thing is like I see social media and like whether it's YouTube or Instagram or this, they are like hungry children that never ever abate their hunger. We've always got to feed them, like they've always need something. So the only no side to it, the only yes side to it is obviously maintaining that release schedule and maintaining that amount of content produce. That really is the greatest and hardest task. But I say also as well that it is about producing quality. We're not wanting to just put out loads and loads of content that doesn't have value in it. I think it's important producing maybe one or two or three bits of content maybe on a monthly basis or whatever, or maybe 4 bits of content on a monthly basis that really do give value, which is the key thing. I think that's important from us as a business and a brand in the industry. The difficulty lies with just maintaining that. And I think that any content producer, whether you're an independent, private, individual YouTuber, or if you're a business or whatever the case may be, that is the hardest thing. It's feeding that hungry child every day and them still being hungry after you've just fed them. That's what it is. But it's been extremely humbling. The growth that we've had on there has been like incredible. And me and Byron and Greg talk about it all the time. Like the growth is just bonkers, and it's really really humbling to have that and have all these people that are wanting to watch the things that Byron produces and that are really into the different things and the new take on a stable technique that that's been in our painting repertoire for a very 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 long time. So
Well, y'all had the Halloween edition boxes out recently. Very cool. If you haven't, viewers, if you haven't seen it, it's these boxes that are decorated for Halloween. You could order the brushes in these really nice wooden boxes. Beautiful work. Do y'all have any plans for any more boxes like that in the future, special edition boxes?
So one of the things, we're very very sort of passionate about is obviously the boxes that the brush ranges are both SM and D coming. We have the standards ranges, but then obviously we've got different customized like lids and inserts and all these different things. But because we are a brand, not just a business, we want to do things and release things which are like limited runs and collections. So we'll have like a pattern or a certain design that will go across various products and it'll be available for a period of time. I can't go into too much detail about obviously what we're doing, but what I can say to you is that, the things that you've seen that you mentioned, obviously we do Halloween, we do Black Friday, we do various, that what we're doing, you're going to see a lot more, and there's some absolutely awesome things coming. That's all I can say. But it's something that we wanted to do because obviously the brushes that come in the box are what people really care about, and I understand that, but it's a shame to have such a lovely presentation box that's designed to show the product as best as possible, but at the same time, and I didn't mention it when I was talking about Series S, but we really try and get people to store their brushes horizontally, not vertically, because a little tip that for any of you viewers watching, the thing is like storing your brushes vertically when they're wet, it can be quite bad for the brushes. And the reason for that is water will permeate into the ferrule where the crimp is on the hair, and that hair that's inside the ferrule will potentially mat together if the water recedes into it. Now, when that hair in the ferrule it does mat together, what happens is the spring in the head can go from the hairs being pulled tight to the point to being like this, because the hair in the ferrule mats and constricts together, because it obviously mats together because of the dampness or the moisture. So as a little tip from taking the Artis Opus hat off for the second, just as a painter, always store your brushes after you've used them horizontally, let them dry flat. And that's why we do the boxes. And then obviously once they're dry, you can store them vertically in a pot if you want, just to keep them tidy on your desk. That's fine. But after you've used them, always store them horizontally, and again, just offering a bit of value for your viewers, which I think is really important, but going back to the point, we are doing some absolutely crazy things very, very soon that I'm sure a lot of you guys will want to sort of be part of. So
So, well, I'm looking forward to that, because you actually answered my next question, was what's coming for Artis Opus. So I'm glad to hear that, because I guess that's always got to be a challenge, because I mean, you know, when you're talking about paintbrushes and the associated products, you want to stay relevant, but also as a business, you want to say, well, we want new products to sell.
Yeah.
But I would have thought before seeing Artis Opus, well, how much more can you do with brushes? But then when I saw the Series D and the actual benefits that it brings, I'm like, so there is more. So it's good to know that y'all are looking at how do we continue meeting the needs of the market.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is even though painting as an exercise, or painting, it's been around for thousands, all right back, painting on inside walls in caveman time, the painting has been, art and artistic release has been part of humanity for since inception. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So the thing is obviously we now have implements and things that we use that are designed specifically for the job. Obviously for miniature painting, we've designed ergonomic brushes. For, fine art, the brushes are designed in a certain way, so they're held in a different place and all that kind of stuff. I think there's a lot of scope for things that can happen within miniature painting specifically, but painting in general, the paintbrush has been around for, don't hold me to this, but I don't know the exact time frame, but it's been around for long time. Yeah. So I don't think the physical paintbrush as an actual tool in itself will ever change that much. But what I do think is there are things like components or materials or different bits and bobs that will make them better for the user, if that makes sense. Yeah. I think that's the angle that we have as a business. We want to make the most ergonomic, best use products that we can for our industry. I think that's really, really important. Future products. I can't talk about any of the things that we're releasing in the future, but what I can say is that that they follow the business practice of, we try to develop things that the user of the product will love and understand why we've created those products. Yeah. And they're designed, as I said, by miniature painters for miniature painters. We're not a company that has not got experience of painting miniatures. Yeah. Just producing products that, quite frankly, we think are going to be useful and acceptable. When we sit down and chat about what we want to do, or a product or an idea that I have or Byron has or Greg has or whatever, the thing is we think of it and we think, right, how is the user going to use this? This is something that we want. It's integral, because off the back of it, like you said it already, off the back of it, all the YouTube videos and all the videos for Kickstarter and all this stuff, it's about showing consumers and showing customers why we've developed it, the benefits of it, and why it's great for our industry, if they follow me. So that's the real key thing. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, James, this has really been a fascinating talk to get an insight, not only into how do you make a brush, but then how do you then apply that, and how do you do videos on it. So thank you for your time that you've spent with us today. I'm really grateful. Now, I'm going to have links down below in the description to not only the Artis Opus YouTube channel, but also to their website, where you can take a look at those brushes and see what they have, and look at the Series D, the Series M, and the Series S, that whole series that we've been talking about. So again, James, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope y'all have a wonderful future ahead for your business and continued growth. And I look forward to seeing the new products.
We can't wait to share them with you. Like if you think what we've done now is great, just wait. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, that's awesome to hear. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview. I certainly had a good time putting it together and talking with James and learning about the insides and outsides of getting brushes to the market. I think it's always fun to hear from the manufacturers and the folks who support us with the various products that we use, to just kind of hear the story behind those. I think it just gives us an interesting perspective on the hobby that we don't always see when we're so focused on just the building and the painting and things like that. So thank you, James, for taking the time to talk with me. There's going to be links down below to the Artis Opus website and to their YouTube channel. Be sure and check that out and let them know that you saw it here. And certainly subscribe to their YouTube channel. They've got some great videos on there. And like I said earlier, they take dry brushing to another level. So regardless of whether you paint minis or not, I think there's something there that any modeler can find useful. So please be sure and check that out. Thank you so much for joining me for this last Tuesday show in December 2020. I am very grateful. I hope you've enjoyed it. I had a good time putting it together, so I hope that in this you found something useful, informative, entertaining, or at the very least, maybe it helped you drift off to sleep. If my math is right, there are 12 last Tuesdays in 2021, so keep looking for those to come out. I plan to do it on into 2021, so be sure and check those out. And that's a great segue to say, why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button that's over here, or I never can remember, but it's in one of those places. Be sure and hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon so you'll know when I have videos that come out. There's also links down below to the various social media that I'm on. Be sure and check those out. And if you're on one of those platforms, connect with me and let me know that you've seen this video, that you've watched some of my others. There's also a link to my blog, so be sure and check that out. I've got quite a few years of archives of actual text and photo blogs before I started doing video. So there's quite a bit there. Check that out. And there's a link to my Patreon campaign. It's been going on for 2 years now, and it's really helped me and my family. So if you would like to take a look at what I offer there and consider supporting me, I would be most grateful. And if you're already a supporter, thank you so much for your support, for standing with me in this that I do, because it's not just about, for us as a family, it's not just about buying paints and models and glue and stuff like that. It really is part of our family income. And there have been times that it's bought tires and radiator hoses and other stuff that we really needed. So thank you so much for your support. It really does benefit and bless my whole family. Well, I hope you and yours had a happy Christmas. It's a few days past Christmas 2020 when this will come out. So I hope you had a Merry Christmas. I hope you were able to enjoy some time with family and friends and eat some good food and open some good presents. So Merry Christmas to everyone. And also, we've got a new year coming up. So I think we're all looking forward to that and hoping 2021 is going to be a little better than 2020. So Happy New Year to everybody. I hope you have a good one coming up, and that we'll be able to eventually start getting back together and doing the things that we call normal. And finally, as I always like to do, I'll leave you with one final thought. In this hobby, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.